If you don't want to be seen, please switch off your video. Okay. Okay, so let's start. Swati from UNICEF. Okay, wonderful. We have people from Mumbai, Lala Lajpat Rai College of Commerce and Economics. We have Anna from Jammu. Welcome, Anna. We have Aishwarya Bose from Kerala. That's great. So we have an all India, crowd joining in. So good evening, everyone. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation. At Red Dot Foundation, we work primarily on gender equality and gender justice. And we are currently hosting a Youth Innovation Challenge, which is on the theme of gender and climate justice, where we are inviting young people of the ages 17 to 30 to share their ideas. And we will pick 10 of these top ideas for mentorship over a 3-month period. Industry experts will be assigned to each of these teams. We will have master classes to help develop these ideas into working prototypes. And then in the final pitch session, which is in October, we will pick 3 top ideas that will receive cash prizes. But all 10 ideas we are hoping will be invited to further accelerators and incubators who we will invite. Maybe there might be corporates as well who will be present, who might pick up these ideas as they have done in the past youth innovation challenges. So do check out our website, safecity.in, to see what we have done in the past few years. This is a parallel activity to the UN Habitat's World Urban Campaign, Urban Thinkers Campus, which we again host every year. And we normally have the Youth Innovation Challenge on the same theme as the Urban Thinkers Campus, where we invite different stakeholders to come and brainstorm, suggestions, ideas, and action points on how to solve some of these main problems. And as you know, the topic is gender and climate justice. Now, this Youth Innovation Challenge is being hosted in partnership with several organizations. So we have the Joint Commissioner of Municipal Administration in the Maharashtra government. We have the Consulate General of Sweden in Mumbai. We have UNICEF India. We have UN Habitat, of course. We have Yuva and the Maharashtra WASH Coalition as partners. And this panel discussion is to help unpack what this topic is, gender and climate justice. And the idea is to incentivize more people, more young people to submit ideas. There is no right or wrong idea. It is an opportunity to test out of the box thinking, innovation. And, if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, you would have tried. And the most important thing is to try. So today, to help me unpack, we have 3 young leaders. We have Arpita Bhagat, who's the campaign manager at Purpose. And I was just saying that I love her work. And, she's been doing a lot of interesting work around environment, but also recently she had something to do at the intersection of gender, urban space, and environment. And then we have Aarushee Shukla, who used to work with Red Dot Foundation. Now she is a data journalist at Equal Measures 2030. So welcome, Aarushee. She's joining us from Lucknow. Arpita is, I think, in New Bombay. And we have Suraj. Suraj is Okay. Jyoti, can you please add Suraj to the screen? Suraj is an educator and a climate warrior from Yuva. So, welcome everyone, and I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself and also tell us what does the theme of gender and climate justice mean to you. And I'm going to start with Arpita.
Thank you, Elsa. Really glad to be here. So I'm a campaign manager at Purpose, and I lead a lot of the work in Maharashtra for our organization. And Purpose essentially is a creative impact agency and a campaigning organization that works on a number of different social impact issues. And we work across nonprofits, foundations, as well as businesses and even international agencies to create impactful movements. We have been running campaign on environment and sustainability since 2015 in India. And some of our well-known work is the Help Delhi Breathe campaign in Delhi. And we started with the Mumbai work back in 2019 with the Solar Wala Best campaign, which talked about electrifying buses. And since last year, we've been really busy building a youth movement on climate through the entry point of biodiversity and biodiversity protection, which is called Biodiversity by the Bay. You might have heard of the biodiversity map of Mumbai. I'm extremely proud of and the platform Ministry of Mumbai's Magic. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I do. And gender and climate justice, I think, are not something that we should see separately. They are part of the whole, if you think about it. Especially gender equality, I think, is a fundamental element of climate justice, because we know that women and girls, trans women including, are the most impacted communities, are the most vulnerable, have the least access to land, have the least say in policy making and decision making, representation in different sort of leadership positions, which I would like to very proudly say that is not the case in our organization. Most of us are women. Yeah, so for me, it means literally everything. I started my work in a workplace via food campaign, and I went on to do various environmental issues, spent a few years working on gender, and Elsa has been part of the gender movement, especially in Mumbai, Maharashtra. And now whatever we do, I think we look at both the intersection together. Sorry, there's a bit of noise. But yeah, I think we'll deep dive into it further and hand it over to Aarushee to speak.
Yes, thanks, Arpita. And I remember when I first met you, you were the local hollaback lead in Mumbai. So yeah, we were doing similar stuff. Aarushee, tell us about you. You know, what have you been doing, and what does this topic mean to you?
Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Arpita. So good evening. I'm Aarushee from Lucknow. I go by the gender pronouns she and her. I have pursued my post-graduation in social work with specialization in women-centered practices from TIS Mumbai, and I'm also a data journalism fellow with Equal Measures 2030, which basically means that over the course of this 1 year, I'll be trained and mentored to produce more data-driven feminist research products. When you ask me what gender or climate justice essentially means to me, I feel that it has this common ground, like Arpita said. We cannot look at it to be something different from the other, because they have this thing which is common to them, and that is both of them signify that there is existence of some sort of injustice within the system in terms of, systemic inequalities that we are dealing with. And like, I'm also, reminded of this Audre Lorde quote, which goes by, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle, which essentially means that we do not live a single issue life. So that is how I look at gender and climate justice, to be interconnected and to, be intertwined in itself. And like we know, and we're very well aware of the fact that climate crisis is something which is disproportionately impacting the vulnerable and the marginalized communities. And therefore, it even, becomes even more important for us to identify this interconnected nature and to explore it and to come up with more feminist approach to climate justice, which would be to, question the very model of growth and development, the model which is so extractive in nature, exploitative in nature, and which is only making rich richer and poor poorer. So this idea of unlimited growth that we have in our mind, and this very unsustainable model of capitalism that we are relying upon is very dangerous. And what exactly we are doing is that the variable nature in this entire economic model, what we are overlooking is that this variable nature is in itself not limitless. Like there is a limit to it. So as a young feminist, I feel, and also the feminist movement, what it is doing is trying to raise some very important questions, like Arpita said, and we really need to build up on this momentum and bring it to the forefront, is what I feel.
Thanks, Aarushee. I think between you and Arpita, you have really unpacked the definition of this very, very, very clearly. And you're right, we are living through a climate crisis. The pandemic is, very evidently an outcome of the climate crisis. And then, those of us in Mumbai, this erratic rain is also part of the climate crisis, and it has an impact on vulnerable communities, and women being one of them. But also, within gender, there's so many intersectionalities that we have to study and unpack. Suraj, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Yuva and your work? And what does this topic mean to you? Because you are a climate warrior.
So, hey everyone, am I audible enough?
Yes, yes.
Actually,
And if
there
you
has been
are,
some
yeah, and
very
if you're
erratic rains over here
trouble,
and power failure.
that's okay. If you want, you can switch off your video. That's fine. I just needed you to put on your video to pin you. For some reason, I couldn't pin
Okay,
you earlier.
okay. I just wanted to add here, like, hey everyone. So myself, Suraj Mishra, as we all can see in this session of gender and climate change, we are suffering from climate change. So much of erratic rains that I have actually a power failure at my place, and so sorry for all this light and stuff. So yeah, I work as a youth advisor at UNICEF. I am in a team member that is Youth People Action Team, and I'm also an educator and a naturalist. And when it comes to climate change, one thing always pops into my mind, that is socio-economic status. Socio-economic status can be clearly imagined by a model of a city. Just close your eyes and imagine any city of any part of the world. You would actually see a city is divided into two parts: one who have and the one who have nots. The have nots are the actual people who are working for the city, and the consumption power is the one who actually are with the rich. So pollution is not something which is done by the people of lower strata. It's the one who are doing from the upper strata, and that's the effect being multiplied on different scales and levels. And the ones who are affected are always the ones who are at the lower strata. You can never see like if there is a gas tragedy or if there is a pollution nightmare or any kind of smog effect, the most people affected would be from middle class or lower middle class. The power of consumption is at few people, concentrated at few people hands, is very much drastic. And that's what I feel, that yes, socio-economic status has to do with climate change and gender equality. Yeah, that's my point.
Thank you. Very well said. So coming back to Arpita, can you share examples? I know you've been very active in, the Mumbai Save RA campaign and other, the mangrove campaign and so on and so forth. Can you give us examples of what this topic looks like in real life, like gender and climate justice? And the idea is to simplify it for, the young people out there so that they can start thinking about ideas.
So yeah, I'm just going to build on to what Suraj was pointing to. I mean, right, like when you look at any city, and especially a city like Mumbai, where there are so many, contrasts which are coexisting, and currently, right this moment, we are facing unparalleled amount of rains again this year. The most affected would be the communities who are living on the fringes. And if you look at Mumbai, 3 million people live on the coastline who are directly impacted. And then I would like to also bring the point of view of like Koli communities. How are Koli communities impacted? And if you look at Koli community, while the men would go out into the sea to harvest, it is the women who will dry, who will soak, who will go and fend for other resources and then sell it to the market. And of course, these are again the women who are rearing the children. It's the women who are maintaining the households, and all of that responsibility falls on women. And if you look at women farmers, and especially whether you look at Maharashtra or you look at any other state, it is the women farmers who do much more than what a male farmer would traditionally do in terms of roles. But when it comes to access to the market or access to land or land ownership, that still remains a question. And then you add to it their social status, right, in society, where they are marginalized, they are open to all sorts of violence, not just at the hands of their partners, but also harassment from society overall. It is the women who are bearing the brunt. It is the women who are also more at risk of any kind of extreme weather events, whether you look at flooding or you look at drought in dry parts of the country, you look at Orissa, or you look at what happened recently with the cyclone Tokte in Gujarat and Maharashtra. Again, so while the ownership is less and less with women, the impact is often more and more. The other example that I want to bring to this forum is also something that we don't necessarily think about, but think about thermal comfort, right? When you think about summers, we have access to electricity, we have access to fans, we have access to coolers, we have access to air conditioners. And the demand for air conditioner has been rising in India, definitely because of rising heat stress. And what that leads to is urban heat island effect, right? That means that while within your household, you're cooling your ambient in surroundings, you're leaving more and more heat to the outside, right? The building sites outside you. And when you look at a city like Mumbai, where there is a stretch of upper middle class household with buildings with large towers, you have right next to them slum inhabitants. You have informal settlements. And what happens is that because these informal settlements often are low and they are in low-lying areas, they end up facing almost 5 to 10 degrees Celsius higher temperature than what you and I face. And they can't afford air conditioning. And they often have metal roofs. So can we think of solutions of providing thermal comfort for all? Because in the next 10 years, all of these situations, whether they're your proneness to extreme flooding, or it is about extreme heat, that's going to go up. So what are we going to do about it? And that's the question that I would like to pose it in front of all the young people listening when you're thinking about solutions. How do you start to solve this problem? How do you ensure that a Koli woman who, because of rising climate change, because of higher development that Aarushee was pointing to, we are focusing on keeping to develop our cities, keeping to build new infrastructure, keeping to design buildings in a way which are not meant to be suitable to Indian environments. But what are we doing about providing sort of access to good energy, good food, good sanitation, and good health to other communities as well? I think that's the question that we need to ask. When we think about transition, when we think about transition from coal to renewable energy, which I'm happy to say is something that is happening at a great pace now. We know that coal is a stranded asset that's been established. The cost of solar is going down since the last 3 to 4 years, and it is becoming increasingly affordable to set up solar, rooftop solar, or you think of getting solar appliances at home. But are we thinking about what happens to the miners who are going to lose the jobs? What happens to construction workers who are also not necessarily represented as women when you think about it? So these are the kind of questions we need to think about. How do we enable just transition to happen? And when I say just transition, I mean to say when governments are committing to going solar or committing to X amount of renewable energy, what does that mean for an average person? And when I say average person, that's not you and I. And I mean a woman farmer, I mean a woman construction worker, I mean a woman nonprofit worker on the field, I mean an ASHA worker. So what does it mean to all of those constituencies? And have we thought of it? Have we addressed it?
I love all those examples, and it just goes to show that we need so many innovative solutions in a wide variety of areas. So there's no shortage for new thinking. So please, those of you listening, please think about it and do apply for the Youth Innovation Challenge. Aarushee, can you add to that list from Arpita? What are some of those real life challenges that are at the intersection of gender and climate justice?
Yes, sure. Um, I'd really like to share some of the experiences from my field work. So back in 2018, so I was in Udaipur. Udaipur is Gogunda district, and to be precise, there's this panchayat goes by the name Majawdi Panchayat there. So I was doing my field work there, and I was living with the family, one of the families in that panchayat. So in the conversations and observations that like we used to do as field workers, we used to talk to women, and we used to see it for ourselves that women were working non-stop. Like literally, they used to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and they used to work till 10 p.m. and sometimes even as late as 11, 12. um, and I remember in one such conversations I was having with the women, they shared that how, if they had been making enough money from farming alone, then their husbands wouldn't have to migrate. Like Arpita was talking about migration, what all it does to the community who stay back, women who stay back and then take care of the family, and they are overburdened, and the triple burden that we hear about. And also they shared this very interesting thing, and they said it very casually that for a couple of months they had been facing this extreme water crisis in their panchayat, and because of that crisis, what exactly they were facing was that they have to travel a couple of kilometers more every day to fetch water. So which means extra hour is going to be spent walking those extra kilometers, which then means that extra exhaustion, extra exertion. So that was one of the experiences. Now, in another such instance, I was doing my fieldwork in Bombay, so in Dombivli, in one of the communities there, and I was trying to put theory and integrate theory and practice, and I was designing a time use survey to see what is the how are the hours spent by different family members in a family. So, in a conversation with a young girl, she shared that that particular day when we were doing that time use survey, she was very tired, and I asked her, why are you so tired today? Because usually she was very cheerful, and but that particular day she was very tired, and she told that her mother woke her up half an hour early because they were informed by their neighbors that the water was not available in the usual spot where they used to get it, so they had to walk a little more to fetch water. So how does one day look like of that girl is that every day she wakes up at 5 a.m. That day she woke up at 4:30 a.m. You fetches water, gets it back, then helps her mother with all the household work. Then post that she goes to school and then she comes back. This is the kind of day that it looks like. Like what I'm trying to do here, build these conversations through these experiences. Like if the connection between gender and climate wasn't clear to us up till now, I think these lived experiences in specific and millions of other experiences like Arpita also spoke about will prompt us to then unpack it further, because we have to really understand, like all three of us, like all four of us have spoken about how it is all interrelated. The macro issues of gender equality, racism, casteism, sexism, ableism, they do not exist in isolation. And what we have to understand and begin with is that it is only going to be amplified with this climate crisis that we are facing. And the marginalized and the vulnerable, like also Suraj pointed out, they are going to be the most who are going to lose out from it, because they do not really have the social cultural capital to protect themselves from this crisis, this impending crisis.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing those examples. They are very relevant, and it just goes to show that, sometimes we live in bubbles and our life is not the same as 70% or 80% of the population. And we need to be a little more, mindful about how others are living and what is the impact. So, for example, during the pandemic, we saw migrants walking back to their hometowns simply because they couldn't afford to live in big cities. Many people have lost their jobs. So if you take a walk down your market lane, and I live in a market area, there are people begging who are not necessarily beggars. They are dressed well, but so many middle class people are also pushed into poverty and they don't have ways to put food on the table. So can we think of different ideas? Like sometime back, somebody had placed refrigerators in public spaces and anyone could leave leftover food in the refrigerator so that other people could come and pick it up and use it. Like, we waste a lot.
Yeah.
Can we open our hearts and minds to think about how can we include other people? It's not charity. It is about thinking about solutions where you equalize resources in a way. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we are only scratching the surface with some of these examples. But Suraj, you work specifically on environment. So can you share some real life examples as well with us of
Yes,
what people are
would,
facing?
would like to add it something here. During my MSc project, I worked on a hemiparasite, a kind of a plant which basically affects mango most. That's macrosolan, also commonly known as bandgul in Maharashtra. Okay, a little bit about it. It has the potential to reduce the yield of mangoes by 25%. Means if a mango is going to be produced 10 kgs, 20 kgs, agar mango tree se aayega, so it would be reduced to just 1 or 2 kgs. The farmers literally used to burn their whole mango orchard and then they have nothing to earn for. Especially in the city of Satara and Kolhapur, as of because those were the areas of my study. So when I went there and I asked, what do you do for it? So we don't do anything for it. It's something, a plant which came into as an allelopathic effect, एक alien species की तरह इंडिया में आया और वो हमारे सारे जितने भी ओरिजिनल इंडिजिनस प्लांट्स है उनको डैमेज कर रहा है. तो एक तो ऑलरेडी फार्मर्स एक एग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी है जहां पे फार्मर्स को सपोर्ट्स बहुत कम है, और अगर आप फार्मर को ही सपोर्ट नहीं दोगे और उसका क्लाइमेट चेंज पे उसका पूरा प्रोडक्शन साइकिकली बिगड़ जाए तो फिर वो कैसे पढ़ेगा? ना तो वो खुद अपना सपोर्ट दे सकता है, ना ही अपने फैमिली को कुछ एक तरीके से एम्पावरमेंट में डाल सकता है, ना ही उसके बच्चों को पढ़ने को लिखा सकता है. एंड स्पेशली सातारा में, क्योंकि आई वाज आल्सो देयर एज अ टीचर फॉर सम टाइम, सो आई नो कि यस, जब पूछा गया कि बच्चे कहाँ गए, मेरे क्लास में से अराउंड अबाउट 50-60 बच्चे थे. हर एक साल में कुछ आधे महीने में कुछ बच्चे कम हो रहे थे. आई जस्ट आस्क वेयर आर ऑल द किड्स. द क्लास पीपल एंड द पीपल स्टार्टेड टेलिंग कि वो फीस नहीं दे रहे हैं एंड दे आर देमसेल्व्स सेइंग कि बस अभी हम और नहीं पढ़ा पाएंगे इसका आगे. एंड स्पेशली व्हेन इट कम्स टू ना कि हम नहीं पढ़ा पाएंगे, ये सवाल वो बॉयज के लिए नहीं बोलते.
करेक्ट.
ये सवाल वो गर्ल्स के लिए बोलते. ये काम करते ना, कितना पढ़ेगा, आगे कितना जॉब है, एक काम कर, तू रहने दे, तू घर पे रह, तू मम्मी को हेल्प कर. जैसे कि आरुषी ने भी कहा कि वो सुबह 4-5 बजे उठ के पानी लेके जाना, घर के कामों में इतना हो जाता है कि वो इंसान पढ़ने के लिए उसमें शक्ति नहीं बचता. तो गर्ल को पीछे रख दो, बॉय को पढ़ाओ, फिर देखो क्या होता है. एंड ऑफ द डे वापस वही होने वाला है, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक इनइक्वालिटी, जो सबसे बेस रूट कॉज है. जब हम इस चीज को देखते हैं और समझते हैं कि हाँ, इसे कैसे कम किया जा सकता है, तो कई सारे, जैसे आपने कहा कम्युनिटी फ्रिजेस है, वैसे कई सारे कम्युनिटी स्कूल्स भी हैं, कम्युनिटी किचन्स भी हैं. अगर ये एक बात हम समझ सकते, क्योंकि बायो में मैं हमेशा बच्चों को पूछता हूँ कि एग्जैक्टली कंसेप्ट क्या है. तुम्हें क्या लगता है कि तुम्हारा घर साफ है, अगर आपने दिवाली में अपना घर साफ कर लिया तो पूरी दुनिया साफ है? नहीं, तुमने वो कचरा बाहर निकाल के फेंक दिया. इफ यू वांट द सिटीज टू लुक ग्रेट, इफ यू वांट द सिटीज टू लुक ब्यूटीफुल, लाइक न्यूयॉर्क हो गया, फिर कोई भी सिटी, उनका सारा कचरा कहाँ डंप होता है? किसी प्लास्टिक यार्ड में, किसी दूसरे अच्छे छोटे से गांव में जो अच्छा था उसको पूरा खराब किया जाता है. तो एक शहर को अच्छा दिखाने के लिए आसपास के गांव खराब किए जा रहे हैं, तो उनका लाइफ डिसबैलेंस हो रहा है ना. तो वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि अपने 4 लोग के परिवार के बाहर निकलिए, और एक कंसेप्ट होता है इंडिया में, दैट इज वसुधैव कुटुंबकम. मेक श्योर दैट द फैमिली, द कम्युनिटी अराउंड इज आल्सो अ पार्ट ऑफ योर फैमिली. व्हाटएवर यू डू, उसको थोड़ा बहुत वहां पे कंट्रीब्यूशन में जाने दीजिए. मैं ये नहीं कहता पूरा एकदम डेडिकेटेडली जाइए, लेकिन एटलीस्ट अपने तरफ से जो भी हो सकता है, should always add in terms of help. Let's say if you are financially capable and if there is someone, a maid working at your place, if you cannot support their education, at least make sure कि उनका जो education gap हुआ है उसको आप कहीं ना कहीं से fill कर सके. उनका basic reading है, not only of their kids but only of the person talking, जो आपके घर पे काम कर रहा है, उनको भी एक बेसिक रीडिंग स्किल भी अगर आ जाए तो भी एक तरीके का एम्पावरमेंट हो. तो जितना हो सके लिटिल बेबी स्टेप्स लेना चाहिए. यस.
I want to respond to 2-3 things that have come up, if I may. So one thing, Elsa, you were mentioning about, opening community and creating community kitchens and things like that. That's happened during the pandemic. I think it's a
Yes, a
lesson
lot.
that we need to take forward, and also the fact that it's not just about that. Like, what do we do about digital divide, right? When education is becoming online, how do we ensure that, can we donate our old phones, or can we support our house servants? That's one point. And the second point, to what Aarushee was mentioning in villages, I think what we are forgetting, and that's where we as women, whether we are from upper middle class, lower middle class, rural, informal, we are, our health, our bodies are all the same. And the exposure that we have to chemicals that the corporations are manufacturing and plugging into our bodies, and a dependence. And I can assure you, like, I've done project in rural Maharashtra as well. All of these chemicals are in villages as well. And in fact, they don't, because they don't have disposal systems in place. They're burning, they're burying them within the soil near their fields. So it's somewhere going into the fields, and to the fact that currently, and according to an IIT Bombay study, your salt also has microplastics. It's not just your salt, like, of course, your fish, for non-vegetarians, all of that also has your plastic. But what happens is that because of the way women's bodies are designed, there is a certain biological element as well. And you can start to see that the incidences of reproductive health issues, PCOD, PCOS, all is rising for women, not just women like us, but women across, because that's a key factor. I mean, it's part of our bodies now. The second thing that Suraj was talking about is that this phenomenon of not in my backyard, right? When the waste that I'm creating, I have to process it, I have to segregate it. But I think, and I hear these arguments all the time, right? On Friday, I was on a Twitter Spaces conversation, which was about education at home and involving children in nature-based education during the lockdown. And somewhere from the audiences, again, we came to waste. So waste has become an extremely palatable environmental issue, because it's visible and it's out there. And you have seen in the last 10 years, the sheer scale of plastics that we are consumed. And ultimately, people talk about their lifestyle change, sustainability at home. I think what's missing in that picture is that you and I are not produced it. It is the same fossil fuel companies who first sold us coal-based solutions, lighting our homes and all of that, are selling us the same solution. And essentially, the waste oil, petrochemicals, which are produced as a byproduct of coal manufacturing, are used to make plastics. Why? Because it's the cheapest way to make it. And while you might say that a PET or other kinds of plastics are recyclable, eventually the recycling rates are very, very low. And in India, we have a very solid informal economy of waste workers. So we are able to recycle like 10 to 15%, but overall it's very low. That's my point number one. So somewhere we have to give that accountability back to the waste, the people who have given us this waste. Like, if you remember 20 years ago, I think Suraj and Aarushee are slightly younger, but Elsa would remember our Cokes used to be in glass bottles. When we used to buy, grocery items, our dals, our milk, all of that used to come in. You used to take, I remember as a kid taking that small, whatever that was called, the steel button, and going and buying milk. And now you have plastics all around. So somewhere that, you have to understand the upstream versus the downstream. Downstream is what we look at when it comes to disposal. We don't look at upstream. We don't think about it. And that's where we also need to put attention to, because tomorrow what will happen is the same fossil fuel companies will come back to you and sell you another solution of an alternative plastic, which is like a magic formula, which they've started to do, but it really isn't. That's really not going to be. And the second point that I wanted to make, and I'm sorry, I'm going into waste because it's my favorite topic, I don't get to talk about it very much, is that a lot of waste that you see in India or in countries like Indonesia or in countries like China, has come from the global north, has come from Canada, has come from US, has come from Europe. So when we go to these countries, they believe that, we are putting stuff out for recycling to happen, right? They have their bins in certain place, but eventually it all lands up in Asian countries in the global south. So I think that's something that I would like people to understand, that there is a political economy on waste, which is not just about you and I segregating. I mean, it's great that we do that, but we have to ask these questions and frame these in context that, they are meant to be framed in. So back
Thank
to
you,
you.
Arpita, for those points. Those are so valid and also makes you think deeper about the issue. So we have a youth innovation challenge that is currently on, and it is on this topic of gender and climate justice. If you were to submit an idea, what would it be? And I'm going to start with Aarushee.
Thank you, Elsa. And like, I'm sorry, but I literally have to respond to the previous conversation that we were having, especially about the political economy of the global north and south. And especially, I felt that the way, Suraj was explaining it to the students back in their community, it's really nice way to explain it, how, who is producing that waste, who is responsible
Exactly.
for, like, where are you resourcing it from, the kind of supply chain, and where you are dumping it. So while Suraj was contextualizing it and explaining in a smaller, micro model, Arpita then built on the model and literally showed us who is to be blamed in the real world. Yeah. So coming back to the question, like, this is a really interesting part of the conversation for me, the Youth Innovation Challenge, because it provides me with a lot of space to ideate and brainstorm, do some research. So I was thinking about it, and I felt that as an intersectional feminist myself, my approach towards brainstorming has to be aligned with the principle of nothing about us without us. And this is something, which is also what Arpita has been talking about. Like, I literally wrote it down when Arpita spoke about how governments commit to something, but what exactly does it mean to the constituencies or the stakeholders that it is, so to speak, of committing it for? So that's really important. And so I felt that, when we talk about climate and gender justice, we really need to make it a people's movement, and thereby building and giving and respecting their agency in the process. So to give some context to the idea that I'm going to propose, so in 2017, in COP 23, there was this gender action plan which was proposed, and there were some major critiques to it, and some of them were, how that there were the specific targets that it spoke about, especially the indicators of success, they were very weak, and also the financial commitment. So it was weak on that. So with that as a context, I think I'd like to propose setting up this decentralized renewable energy resource model, which is then co-owned by the rural communities. And also, along with that, having this collective commitment making mechanism within and across the climate goals. So then it is taking care of multiple issues. First of all, the ownership of all the objectives, the agenda setting is with the community, and also the accountability is something, self accountability, and also accountability, which is an ongoing process, which is something which will be tracked by the community. And it's not going to be just for one specific climate goal, but within and across the climate goals. So like, I know, like, I need to do a lot of explaining to actually explain what is the idea that I have in my mind, but this was a little gist of it. And I honestly want that, these commitments should be tracked by the youth from the community, because then, they'll have this platform to directly interact with the representatives, to take their demands to them, to have that kind of power to set the agenda. And also because I feel that that's the truest sense of promoting shared leadership, when you can actually set the agenda, and communicating, doing advocacy to, ensure that the marginalized causes are brought to the forefront, and also to be actively participate in the decision making process. So this was something that I like I'd like to propose as a plan.
And all driven by evidence-based data. So without the data, you can't speak from a position of authority. So, and we as citizens need to have that data. So I think it's a great idea. And ideas can be of all kinds, from apps to policies to, things like this, models where you can contribute towards data gathering and of course, using that data. So thanks for that very interesting solution. I hope either you can implement it or somebody can pick it up as well and work on it. Suraj, what about you? If you had to submit an idea, what would it be?
Yes, yes. First of all, I would like to actually pinpoint the word the Arpita said, कि biological things, the biological anatomy of a female responds differently to the climate changes. There has been various reports from, if I remember correctly, from 2000 till 2019, various reports from French, even from the current heat wave, that a human female body responds at a 25% more mortality rate as compared to a male. There are various cyclones, typhoons, where even researchers suggest कि in this type of research or in this type of climatic event, such age group के मरने के chances ज्यादा हैं. और उसमें फीमेल का नंबर हमेशा हर साल पिछले साल से बढ़ते जा रहा है. तो इवन दो जब ये इवेंट के बारे में हम लोगों को बताते हैं कि यार कल क्लाइमेट इवेंट के ऊपर हर जेंडर के साथ में, तो पीपल आस्क हाउ इज दैट टू कनेक्टेड, व्हाई आर यू मिक्सिंग टू थिंग्स, देयर इज समथिंग जेंडर इनइक्वालिटी, दैट्स अ ऑल टुगेदर डिफरेंट कंसेप्ट, एंड ये डिफरेंट कंसेप्ट है. लेकिन आरुषी ने भी काफी क्लियरली मेंशन किया कि जितनी भी चीजें हैं ना, ये अलग अलग नहीं है, कोई भी आइसोलेशन में नहीं है, everyone is somewhere linked to each other. So there is a model which I follow in my class. That's at a very small level. From past 4 years I have been doing that model. I call it as Ardhanarishwara model. Ardhanarishwara model is a very simple thing. I asked my class the first lecture, I asked them the first question to all my boys, pinpointing the name, are you 100% male? And that question gets into their ego. How can he ask me I am 100% male when all girls a little bit giggle and they're like, ऐसे कैसे बोल दे कि मैं 100% मेल नहीं हूँ, क्या पता क्या हो जाएगा. तो बच्चे 11th के बच्चे ऐसे सोचते हैं. तो when you tell them ना, actually मैं सामने से बोलता हूँ मैं भी 50% फीमेल हूँ और मैं 50% मेल भी हूँ, तो उनको लगता है मतलब मे बी सर LGBT के हिसाब से कुछ बोल रहे. नहीं, I am XY biologically. My father contributed 50% of mine, and the mother contributed 50% of mine, and same goes to the daughters as well. So when it comes to the question, are you 50% female? Even in various cultures in our history, in a mythology, it's said कि Shiva is empty without Shakti. That's the concept of Ardhanarishwara. And what I do in these 2-3 years when they are together with me, I make sure that I impart value education in terms of empathy, acceptance, thoughtfulness, so that even if I'm not going to make a change at 1,000 people, I'm going to make change at 10 to 20 people. So this is what educators can do at a level of their own simple class, not 1,000 people, not 2,000 people, just make a chain of 10 people and let them educate the other 10. And that's goes to the thought ना, like in the first साल में initial year में जो बच्चा ये था कि यार अर्धनारीश्वरा कैसे सर, मैं कैसे फीमेल हो सकता, मैं तो फीमेल हूँ ही नहीं, मेरे में तो ऐसा कुछ सिमिलैरिटी ही नहीं है, मेरा आवाज अलग है, मेरा पर्सनालिटी अलग है, मैं 10 लोगों के बीच में चलता हूँ तो मेरा ऐसा मतलब एक रुतबा है, वो जो एक रहता है कि मेरे में एक रुतबा है, उसको डाउन करना है और एक एक्सेप्टेंस दिखाना है कि हम सब इक्वल है. There is nothing like boys are greater than girls or girls are greater than boys. Girls never ask them to be called great, they just ask them to be called equal. अगर वो एक चीज अगर बच्चों के दिमाग में चला जाए तो आने वाला जनरेशन काफी हद तक एक सुधर सकता है. एंड व्हेन प्रॉब्लम आता भी है, कोई क्लाइमेट चेंज क्राइसिस आता है या फिर कोई इश्यूज आता है, तो वो उस पर स्टैंड लेंगे. जैसे कि अर्पिता ने भी मेंशन किया था कि कई सारे साइंस रिसर्च में या फिर किसी भी बड़े से बड़े हाईली प्रोफाइल्ड डिग्निफाइड जॉब में भी आपको पे स्केल का बहुत बड़ा गैप दिखता है. फिर भले ही एजुकेशन सेम हो, क्वालिफिकेशन, इवन टैलेंट अगर अच्छा भी होगा तो भी आपको पे कम दिया जाएगा. तो अगर ये जनरेशन को ये बात पता चल जाए कि वी आर नॉट समथिंग डिफरेंट, वी ऑल आर कोरिलेटेड, वी ऑल आर जस्ट फ्रॉम द वन सिंगल थ्रेड, जस्ट थोड़ा सा पार्टीशन है, सो दैट नेचर का बैलेंस बना रहे. अगर ये बात हम उनको समझा दे तो आगे चल के वो खुद अपने जॉब पे अगर उसको कोई उसके साथ में कोई दूसरा खड़ा रहा तो बोलता तो कम पैसा मिलेगा, वो खुद बोलेगा नो, इक्वल पे और एल्स आई वोंट वर्क विथ यू. दैट शुड बी द स्टैंड ऑफ अ मैन व्हेन इट कम्स टू अ फीमेल. एंड ऑल्सो अगर कुछ नेचर प्रॉब्लम्स होते हैं तो दे शुड अंडरस्टैंड कि अरे हाँ यार, अगर हीट वेव हो रहा है तो दिस पर्सन हैज अ डिफरेंट बायोलॉजिकल एनाटॉमी, दिस पर्सन इज सफरिंग फ्रॉम सर्टेन, लेट्स से उनका मेंस्ट्रुअल साइकिल्स चल रहा है, पीरियड्स चल रहा है, या फिर उनके बॉडी पे एक अलग इफेक्ट पड़ रहा है, तो आपको उतना कंसीडरेट होकर समझना पड़ेगा कि लेट्स ये काम आज मैं कर लेता हूँ या फिर ये काम मैं बांट लेता हूँ। ये चीज बहुत कम देखने को मिलता है कि हम कई बार देखते हैं, जैसे कि अर्पिता अरुषि ने भी सही से कहा था कि आप बीमार हो, आपका तबियत खराब है, आप किसी भी हालत में हो, आपको फैमिली मेंटेन करना है, आपके ऊपर एक एक्सपेक्टेशंस है, जो एक्सपेक्टेशंस टू बी वेरी फ्रैंक मेल्स के ऊपर नहीं होता, फीमेल्स के ऊपर ज्यादा होता है। तो इवन क्लाइमेट चेंज क्राइसिस में जहां पे लोगों के जॉब जाते हैं, तो जो एक फीमेल अपना करियर सेट कर रहे थे, उनका करियर पीछे चला जाएगा बिकॉज ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज क्राइसिस। सो ऑल दिस टॉपिक्स आर रिलेटेड इन अ वे, and I feel that Ardhanarishwara model is somewhat working at its level. So yeah, I would like to recommend that. Yeah.
Great. Another great idea, which is not very obvious. So, you know, like I said, ideas can be of all kinds, right? Arpita, what's your idea? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, that was very interesting, actually, Suraj. It just got my brain thinking. Um, I have a couple of, I think, examples from what I've been seeing over the years, and then maybe a little bit of my own original idea. I think, Elsa, when we grow old, we've seen so much that, you start to replicate models and not necessarily hold your originality anymore. But one of the best examples, and I love this examples, and it's just stuck with me. I came to read about it some years ago, is that of solar Sahelis in Rajasthan. I'm not sure if you've heard. It's very likely that you would have, if the young people present here listening to us have not, just look it up. Basically, the idea is, how do you train women from villages to install decentralized solar energy systems, solar lighting systems, and others in their own households? And this has been tested even in Africa, even in some other poorer countries of the world, and it is just brilliant. And the other example is of what I was talking about earlier, is the disproportionate impact he stressed on informal settlements in urban spaces. There is a model that is called Modroof, I believe, which is being tried right now in Gujarat, where sustainable roofing system from recyclable material, from food waste and others, are being implemented in informal settlements. I think that, to me, I love that idea. I think if somebody is able to replicate that more in other cities, that would be great. The third example is more around entrepreneurship and how do you involve women to bring livelihood to them. And all, like both my examples, if you think about it, are giving livelihood option to communities. Because when you think about it, and this is the most important point which has not come up in this conversation, and I think it should have before, is the fact that in low-income communities, right, whether you look at urban settings or rural settings, their livelihood is their key issue. And climate change is making that more difficult, right? When you think of cyclone, and to some extent, the pandemic is a part of the whole environmental degradation that is being caused by mankind. You and I will go on. Of course, we might have pay cuts. Some of us will lose job. I'm not denying that. But here, the question of survival becomes, the very survival becomes a question for these communities. And if you're able to provide them livelihood, that not only gets them to make a living, but also develop more sustainable communities who are able to withstand extreme weather events and prepare and adapt and build resilience, right? Resilience is one of the important theme of this challenge. That, to me, would be the best example. So one of the other examples I love is EcoFem. I don't know if you know, it's a Auroville startup, social startup, which engages with women from the communities to make cloth pads, right? And this is, again, me going back to sustainable menstruation, where you're not using the current existing plastic-based products in the market, but you're using cloth pads, and at the same time, you're providing income to the community, right? And there could be various examples like that. These are three examples on the top of my head, which have fundamentally climate and gender justice pillars together. The other thing that I've been thinking about is, which is as a campaigner, right? A campaigner is somebody who's challenging status quo on a day-to-day basis. So I'm constantly thinking about where lies the power, who needs to be moved, who needs to take action so that community who doesn't have power gets some power and their voices are amplified, right? That's a campaigner. So one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is how do we ensure that there is representation of women in policy making, and not just women when you're creating gender policies, right? But women's representation when you're creating policies on air pollution, right? On policy on renewable energy transition. Like there needs to be a component, not necessarily a component which is a side goal, but there needs to be a framing which looks at people not just as man. Because when you think of a person, when you think of an engineer, or when you think of a farmer, when you think of a worker, a miner, it's your brain is automatically socio-economic, socially programmed to think of a male, right? So your policies are designed primarily by men. Your policies are sort of researched by men, and therefore there is all the policies that you have currently are male. So could we think of a way, could we have probably a pre-legislative consultative process as part of that? There is an ambit in the policy making space in India where before a policy is released, there is a draft notification which invites public comments. Could we ensure that we are speaking definitely to women, right? Because, and especially right now in the last 2 years when we are operating online, where therefore there is a problem with access, right? Digital divide exists. Could we ensure that we are reaching out to women? Could we become that third party who ensures that women's voices are included, that they are explained? Because the policies are drafted in a way that it's very hard for anybody to comprehend, leave aside a woman who probably does not have the best education, does not have access to the internet, does not have access to resources and support. So could we do something around that? And that's something that I'm very hopeful to continue doing.
And in addition to doing that, also explaining to people and giving them sufficient time to understand the plans and put their comments, because often they put it out there very sneakily and you don't even know that it's there.
Exactly. And you think about development plans, right? The master plans of cities when they're announced. And I'm sure Elsa, you at least remotely seen the development plan 2034 of Mumbai and the kind of gaps it had. There is absolutely very little, I wouldn't say there's none, but there is very little consideration given to resilience of a city, coastal resilience or resilience against flooding. I don't know if there is a pillar for safety of women that's considered in designing roads and constructing all that land that they want to keep constructing. So these are the kind of framing that we need to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we proceed, I wanted to ask people that if you have any questions, do post it into the chat section and then I will invite you to speak up. So Faizan says we are talking about climate justice and innovation. Do you think in the wake of innovation, we are losing sight on some important issues such as what? So I'm not really clear as to what kind of issues are we losing sight of, because when we are talking about climate justice and gender justice, we've already spoken about intersectionality. We've already spoken about not designing solutions without being part of the solution yourself, looking at communities, looking at it from an inclusivity lens. So I'm not sure what is your question, but I will come back to you on that. I wanted to bring Swati Swati Mohapatra from UNICEF in, and I wanted to ask you, Swati, you will have to put on your video because I can't pin you up. But I wanted to ask you, how can we, how can we create more spaces where young people can be included? And I know UNICEF is doing a lot with young people. So please, your thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. And it's so refreshing to hear from Arpita Aarushee and also Suraj, who really has been talking about. I feel, climate and gender are two things where we need to really focus on young people because they are the generation which will be taking on their life in the years to come. And climate, I feel, one is, of course, the climate change. But the important thing that we look, from the point of view is what action can be taken. What action a child, in his or her uh, house at the level of the family or at the level of the community can really take, because climate, I realize that we may talk maybe at any platform, but individually we can do a lot. And individually, when we do a lot, then change can happen, and it becomes then a complete chain of people coming together and working around it. So I feel every platform for young people is important, because I realize all over India, a lot of young people are coming and talking about climate, and they are doing a lot of things at the individual level, whether in Maharashtra, whether in any other state. So platforms must be given to young people to talk about these issues. And of course, gender is very much an important subject, which is inclusive of any kind of work that one does. So it's very important. Like, I was very impressed with Suraj when he talked about the Adnareshwari, the whole model that he talked about, and how he is, making young boys aware about it. So these kind of innovations or models are really important to come up to a platform where people really talk about it. And my major focus at, while being in UNICEF, is basically to provide space and platform for young people to really come up and voice their opinion on issues. And the voice, and like Elsa said, it's not about, like the whole challenge that has come up is not about always being critical about issues, but also coming up with solutions and ideas
Exactly.
which is implementable and which can be taken up by people and is scalable as well. So I think that is the idea, and good luck for this challenge, because I know we all are part of it. So thank you guys for coming up with such wonderful ideas, and it's really refreshing, as I said in the beginning, to hear from all of you as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Vats. And my last question to all of you is, looking forward, what makes you hopeful? So, Arpita.
I think Swati ji has said what makes all of us hopeful, but I personally, and I strongly believe, because I've also taught in Xavier's a little bit, and I'm amazed by the amount of intelligence and exposure the young people of today have. There is a lot to be hopeful for, and you've seen all of these movements led by young people, whether you look at gender, or you look at climate, or you look at environment, you look at recently the Moller movement, which has just done such beautiful work. Whether you look at Fridays for Future, you look at Let India Breathe, or so many other movements. And within our own city, there is the RA movement, and the championing of forest and working together with forest communities in RA or in Mall and other places. I think it's beautiful. The other thing I've also realized is that young people of today are very, very clear about their priorities. They understand justice very well, Elsa. So you could pretty much unmute any of them here, and they could be speaking on justice themselves. I don't think they need me to come, or any of us to come and tell them. I think they're really, really smart. And I think, because when I started in the climate movement, as you can imagine, it gets very depressing, because things are constantly getting worse, right? It's very hard, and it brings you down, because you don't do this work for just because it's work. You do this because you're committed to it, you're passionate, you're invested, you're dreaming about it, and you're taking it wherever you go. That's so you live and breathe it. whether it is fight for a just world for women or it's fight for a just habitable world, like we say at Purpose. And young people today, however, are able to convert this hopelessness into collective action and movement building. And they are being able to do it not just digitally, but do it simultaneously with digital as well as offline movements. And we have seen it with the CA/NRC, we have seen it with climate, we have seen it with gender and trans movement and the whole pride parades, right? Like they've beautifully evolved. So there is a lot to be hopeful for. This current generation is gifted, their intelligence, they're well thought out. We only have to ensure that they have the opportunity, like Swatiji was saying, to speak, to articulate, to take action, and they're able to engage in a dialogue across generations. So it has to be generational, whether we look at gender justice or climate justice. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Arpita. Aarushee, your generation has the burden of all the wrong decisions that we have made in ours. So what makes you hopeful?
To be honest, when I see young feminists collectivizing, mobilizing, taking charge of things, asking important questions, and not being afraid, laying out their demands, and not just stopping at that, making sure that it is well noted and action is taken upon it. All of that makes me hopeful. And adding to that, I like seeing young people critiquing existing practices and not just blindly following traditional models of growth, development, productivity, a toxic productivity, and instead, prioritizing well-being, happiness, reaching the last person, or, identifying the marginalization within the intersectionalities. Like we always talk about intersectionalities, it has become a buzzword, is what I feel. But we really need to go past that and identify what are the marginalizations within those intersectionalities. And well, that is again what keeps me going. And as a young feminist, I also feel that, and I also believe that the role of young people is to reimagine practices and to innovatively address the existing issues. And like even Swati spoke about, we cannot just limit ourselves to critiquing and critiquing. We really need to go one step further and create and reimagine practices. And, to acknowledge the fact that it is important to know our history and to build upon it. But if the need be, then we really need to reimagine it as well.
You're very right, and earlier this year I heard somebody say, and it made so much of sense, that 21st century problems require 21st century solutions. Unfortunately, we are living in a world that is based on 19th century thinking and institutions that were developed in the 20th century. So, and those just don't meet the needs of today's problems. So we really have to rethink and reimagine. So thanks, Aarushee, for that. Suraj, what about you? What makes you hopeful?
To be very honest, a lot of my points were covered by Arpita, like how the youth is going on. But still, I would like to add just one example. Like there were some colleges from Karnataka and there were some examples from Netherlands and Finland as well, where people actually started boycotting something which is not of their need. In our previous generation, I'm not blaming someone, I'm just saying that our previous generation didn't knew how much to use and how to use things or resources wisely. Now, like for example, if there is a Colgate ka or Pepsodent ka toothpaste pack, so every information is there on the inner coat, then why to have that extra additional that box wala thing, that everything information is there? Why to have that? If you are going to reduce certain small steps also, that also shows how vigilant you are. So it needs to be very much understood that there are various other green practices. Various researchers even state that climate change on paper is actually solved. On paper, we have all solutions, but the only thing is the reluctantness. Whether do we have to apply it or not? If we apply it, who is going to be affected the most? That's the most severe question. It's not the one who are at the lower socioeconomic strata. It's the one who hold the power. They have to change their whole routine of working. They have to suffer losses. So they do not want the change to happen because it's not in their ball game. So it simply feels like if India has so much of nuclear power, then use it for electricity generation. No? Why to burn coal? Why do you want to use the energy or type of energy which is getting so redundant? Use greener methods. But greener methods are there. Then they would say there is a way of recycling plastic. Yes, recycling plastic is there, but it is also equally harmful. Like plastic recycling के time पे pollution होगा ही होगा. So it's always understandable if a damage is done, only you can reduce the collateral damage. You cannot make sure that damage is completely gone. So there would be a scar always left on earth by humanity, even though if humans are not there. So we need to understand this thing and be a little bit more inclusive about our ideas. Let them give other the space कि हाँ मेरा आइडिया हो गया बोल के आप भी बोल लीजिए, देखते हैं जिसका जो सही लगेगा उसके हिसाब से मिक्सअप करके आगे चलेंगे. ये कोलैबोरेशन अगर हम कर सके थॉट्स का, रेसेस का, जैसे अर्पिता जी ने भी कहा कि जिसके लिए बन रहा है उनको तो पूछ लो एक बार कि पॉलिश किसके लिए बन रहा है. तुम उसके लिए बना के छोड़ दोगे फिर बोलोगे नहीं मैंने अच्छा किया, वो नहीं चलेगा. उसके पॉइंट्स लेना जरूरी है. तो यस, कोलैबोरेशन एंड इंक्लूसिवनेस, दैट आर द टू वर्ड्स आई वुड लाइक टू क्लोज माय आंसर विथ. आई एम होपफुल फॉर. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was such an interesting discussion, and I hope all those listening would be inspired to submit some ideas to the Youth Innovation Challenge. Jyoti has put it in the chat section. So do circulate to your friends as well. Encourage them to submit ideas. There's no wrong idea. And, who knows, your idea might be picked up for mentorship and might come to life. And that's very exciting. So please take the opportunity to do that. In the past, the ideas have been picked up by corporates. They've gone on to, start their own organizations as well. So you never know what's in the future for you. I'm going to be stopping the recording, and I will, be here to answer your questions for another 15 minutes. But I want to thank everyone who's joined us, especially Arpita Bhagat, Aarushee, Shukla, Suraj, Mishra, Swati Mohapatra. It has been such a wonderful discussion, and y'all have been so eloquent and articulate. So thank you very much.